So today, I want to talk about the connections between the Ming Dynasty China and the Ottoman Empire in the 16th century. In the 16th century, the Ottoman Empire had already conquered large territories in 3 continents. This is a list, and it's definitely not very exhaustive, of major Ottoman conquests since its capture of Constantinople in 1453 and all the way into the 16th century. So, as the empire quickly expanded, the Ottoman Sultan claimed Ottoman universal sovereignty in the Islamic world and beyond. The Ottoman Sultan's claim to be the caliph of the Islamic Caliphate and the protector of Islam and all Muslim populations. On the other end of Asia, the Ming Dynasty China claimed to be the central kingdom that all under the heaven should come to introduce and to submit to China. So this map was made in the beginning of the Ming Dynasty in 1389. Chinese name is Daying Wenyi Tu, the universal map of the Great Ming. So the Chinese universalism view is very well expressed in this map. So China is depicted as disproportionately large, occupying the center of the world, and the rest of the world is very small. And we can see that by the 14th century, China already knew the lands to the very far west, even including Africa and the Mediterranean world. And we know that these lands were definitely beyond the Chinese control. However, they were still included in this universal territories of the Ming Dynasty under the Chinese sovereignty. There is no doubt that in the 16th century, the 2 empires already know about each other. But the question is, how much do they know? And how do they describe each other? And how factual are their descriptions? And how do they perceive each other in the respective claim to their own universal sovereignty? So today I want to talk about the 2 works of 2 Asian scholars in the 16th century, one Ottoman and one Chinese. The Ottoman work I want to talk about today is Kitai Nama, or the Book of China, written by an Ottoman merchant and scholar, Ali Akbar, in 1516. It was originally written in Persian and later translated to Ottoman Turkish. Modern translations include the translations in Arabic, Turkish, and very roughly in Chinese. So I can read the primary source. And the Ottoman had long admired China because of its luxuries, and especially the Chinese porcelains. As we know, the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul had the largest collection of the Chinese porcelain out of China. So one motivation for Ali Akbar to write this book about China was to introduce the great wealth in China to the Ottoman Sultan. And as we know, this was also shared by many other European explorers in the Age of Discovery to access China. But he wrote more than the Chinese porcelains. He talked a lot about the Chinese government, the Chinese legal system, and even military organization. And many of his descriptions were very accurate. He talked about there were 2 legal systems in China, one managed by the Ministry of Justice, Qinggu, and the other managed by the Emperor's secret police, the Jingyue. But in addition to the accurate information, there are also inaccuracies. He described the Chinese Emperor Zhengde as a Muslim convert. So he built a large mosque in Beijing. He engraved the Quran on the walls in Arabic and Chinese. He prostrated himself to the direction of Mecca, and he prayed to Allah for hours and hours. He also said that many Chinese people were very eager to follow the emperor, so they learned about Islam and converted to the Muslims. But as we know, these are exaggerations. So why did Ali Akbar exaggerate the Islamic influence in China? So in the book, in his dedication to Suleiman the Magnificent, he envisioned the Ottoman Sultan to be the Solomon of his age, and also he wanted the Sultan to revive the laws of Muhammad and spread it to the rest of the world. So how to do it? And Ali Akbar's answer is to learn from China. China has a superb legal system, according to him, a perfect government, and China was a de facto Islamic country with a Muslim emperor and a growing Muslim population. So, therefore, it's legitimate for the Ottoman Empire to emulate a perfect model Islamic country in the East. How to get this model Islamic country in the East? So, in the beginning of the Book of China, Ali Akbar mentioned two routes, one via Khotan on the top and the other via Kashmir in the bottom. But he only described a few stops along the two routes, and the route only started from the Oxus. He didn't mention anything at all about how to get from the Ottoman Empire to there. But the Chinese source I'm going to talk about it today does provide a very detailed, stop-by-stop itinerary of the route connecting China and the Ottoman Empire. It's called 西域土地人物略, or the record of the lands and peoples of the western regions. So, this route covers over 100 Central Asian, Western Asian, and African cities. This route starts at Jiayuguan, which was the Ming Dynasty border path in the northwest. So this is an illustration that goes with the text. Jiayuguan is on the very right end in the red box, and the arrows showing the way that went. This book was first published in 1542. So in my talk today, I'm going to introduce to you the last 1/5 of this route. So these are the two pages of text and 5 pages of the. So the Ottoman portion of the route starts with Medina. Medina is on the left of this page in the red box. The text says that Medina has Muslim population, and the Muslim they wear the headgear. And next is Mecca on the right in the red box. It says Mecca has 2 walls. People go to Mecca for worship, but they could not leave the city. Only clerics were allowed to leave the city. And then the route goes on to Cairo in Africa, and then back to EurAsia in Amman, Beirut, Palmyra, and Tartus. I'm not going to dive into the details of each city or tell you how I identified each place, but if you're interested, you can read my paper. So the next page, it goes to the Saladin's castle, which is in present-day Syria, and then to Aleppo, and then to Asia Minor, passing Adana, Kournia, Ankara, Antalya, and Bursa. I want to give you some examples of how accurate some of the descriptions are. The author mentioned there are water mills near Aleppo, and this is confirmed by archaeological finds in the area. He mentioned the textile industries in Ankara and a few other Anatolian cities, and these are examples of beautiful textiles from Anatolia made in the 16th century. He talked about there were big ships in the sea to the west of Bursa that can carry 1,000 people and a 3 months of food supply. And as we know, Bursa was the center of the Ottoman silk trade in the 16th century, importing the silk mainly from Iran, sometimes from Asia, and resell them to the rest of the Mediterranean world. The final destination of this route is a large city on the left called Lumi. The text says the city has 2 walls. A sovereign prince lives in the city. There are both Muslims and Chinese. There are translators. People there cultivate the dry goods, but the city has no major agricultural products. Bursa is located around 1,200 li to the east, and I made a mistake, it's about 400 kilometers. So where is Lumi? What is it? So the text said there are translators, so there must be foreigners in the city, so it must be a cosmopolitan city. A German scholar of the 19th century said it is Rome. Rome was a cosmopolitan city, and phonetically, Lumi, Rome sound alike. But is it really Rome? As we know, this is a Google map. So Rome is over 2,000 kilometers away from Bursa, the land route, but the text only says it's only 400 kilometers away. So it's very unlikely. And also, the text says it's not governed by a priest like Rome, but by a sovereign prince. So I think it's more likely Istanbul, the Ottoman capital, where the sultans lived under and ruled over the empire. And of course, there were many foreigners because many foreign envoys visited. So I constructed this route using Google Maps again. So you can see the route that goes from Arabia to Africa and then back to InterAsia, passing Asia Minor, and finally to where Europe meets Asia. So far I've talked about what is accurate in this text. I haven't talked about what is not. So now let me show you a few things. So these houses in the blue box, they're Chinese houses. They're not Ottoman-style buildings. And here in quite a few places, including Istanbul, the text said there are Chinese people. And here in the green box near Ankara, there is a 巡检司. And that is the Chinese police office, usually designated to patrol remote areas. So why there are Chinese houses, Chinese people, and a Chinese police office in the Ottoman Empire? There is actually an earlier precedent in the Han Dynasty. This is the book of the later Han. And in this text, it says that people in where is probably the Roman Empire look just like the Chinese. So that's why the Roman Empire in many Chinese documents is referred as the Great Qin. Qin is the name of the first Chinese imperial dynasty. So the name literally means Great China. So similar to this Han Dynasty precedent, one motivation of including some outlandish Chinese elements in the Ottoman Empire is for self-flattery. It's good to know that a remote, powerful empire is just like China, and the people there look just like the Chinese. So it is in some way similar to how Ali Akbar said there is a Muslim emperor in China and there is a growing Muslim population. So to the Chinese author, the Ottoman Empire is in many ways similar to the to a Chinese country. But there is more. The author reveals another motivation in the preface. I have translated the entire preface in my paper, if you're interested to read it. But basically, the main idea is that unlike the nomads who do not share the same life ways as the Chinese, people in the Western regions that do have the same mind and nature as Chinese people. And in the past, the Western regions were under Chinese reign in the jurisdiction of Dunhuang, and the people there have already been exposed to Chinese teachings and the Chinese ways of life. They also practice agriculture and sericulture. To the very end of the map, there are Chinese houses, Chinese people, and a Chinese police office. And the author says, I keep these records of the lands and the peoples of the Western regions so that one day in the future, China can reassert the Chinese sovereignty in the Western regions, which include the Ottoman Empire, and reteach them about the Chinese laws and teachings. So, in other words, the author believes that China has legitimate sovereignty over all the countries in the Western regions. China, but can it really transpire? How can he realize it? As we know, in the 16th century, the Ming Dynasty actually already stopped further military expansion to the west or to any other directions. This is because in 1449, during the war between the Mongol and the Ming Dynasty, the Chinese Emperor Zhengtong was captured by the Mongols. So after this incident, the Ming Dynasty stopped military expansion and adopted a more conservative foreign policy. And its management focus to the management of China proper. So without further military penetration, how could the Ming still claim Chinese sovereignty in the Western regions? The author offered his answer in a postscript, which I also translated in my paper if you want to read it. So, just like how Ali Akbar supported the Ottoman foreign policy for further expansion, the author of the Record of the Western Regions also supported the Ming's current foreign policy, but this is not an expansionist policy. The author opposed to invade the Western regions by military force and intimidating people there. He says the losses incurred from military aggression far outweigh any benefits it could bring. He says Confucius, who highly praised the Asian sage kings, like King Wu of the Zhou dynasty, who influenced the people in the West from far away by his kingly virtues instead of by military force. And it's also similar to how Ali Akbar wanted the Ottoman Sultan to be the Solomon of his time. The Chinese author wanted the Chinese emperor to just follow the way of the ancient Chinese sage kings and spread the Chinese teachings far and wide. In other words, even if the Ming cannot penetrate into the Western region by military force, according to the author, it's not a problem. The right way to do is to extend the Chinese universal sovereignty in Central and West Asia by cultural assimilation, by spreading the superior Chinese culture, by impressing people there with the Chinese laws and teachings, and the Chinese emperor's great virtues. So people in Central and West Asia, including the Ottoman Empire, would willingly recognize the Chinese sovereignty and join the Chinese empire. So overall, Ali Akbar and the author, who is anonymous, of the Record of Western Regions, they're just like the contemporary European explorers. They at one hand showed great interest in faraway lands and other peoples, but at the same time, they describe the others through their own cultural lenses. So, therefore, in the writing, we see a melange of truth and tale. The truth shows the breadth of their geographical knowledge, while the tale tells us that they use these writings for a political agenda. I want to end the talk today by asking an imaginary question. So how would Ali Akbar describe Americas if he went to Americas before Columbus? Maybe just like Columbus saw the great potential of converting the natives to Christians, Ali Akbar may tell the Ottoman Sultan that the Amerindians were eager to follow Islam. And how would the author of the Record of the Western Regions describe America if he went there before Columbus? So maybe he would tell the emperor that he discovered new land, but the new land already have Chinese people living there, living in Chinese villages. He may even persuade the empire to send an army of Chinese officials there to spread the Chinese teachings. But this is an imaginary question. We won't know more until we find some document of pre-Columbus Chinese Ottoman work. And I hope it's not the government is bad.